Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Down Syndrome Center podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Kishore Volodi. And today's topic is so important. It's one that we talk about quite a bit in clinic, particularly as our pediatric patients get a little bit older. We start to run into issues with overweight and obesity. And I think it's something that we need to definitely have some thoughts on how best to manage, perhaps even prevent those issues, because we know so many medical issues can come about related to weight gain in our population. And so today I'm so excited to have Shannon Frizzell joining us. Shannon, I'll have you introduce yourself here in a moment, but Shannon is a member of our Down Syndrome Center team, and we are so excited to have you on the podcast today. So Shannon, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you love working with our population.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to get to talk about all the things that I love today. So I am a registered dietitian, and I have been working with the Adult Down Syndrome Center recently. So I work with mostly adult patients, and we do kind of one-on-one nutrition counseling there. I also work as a clinical dietitian at UPMC Presbyterian, so working in the hospital with patients with a lot of different kinds of issues. But one of the things that I really love about working with the Down syndrome population is they're just a population that really gets into the goals that we set together. They give it their all and they really participate. And it's just really enjoyable for me to be able to share something that I'm so passionate about and always get such a positive response.
Well, I love it. And we are so glad to have you as part of the team. I guess, why don't we go ahead and just start with just basically what are some of the challenges that we see nutritionally, or reasons that we see more weight gain concerns in people with Down syndrome? What are some of those reasons that you can give us?
Yeah. And the reasons that I give are kind of just based off my experience in working with the population. So it might not really be the same for everybody. But I think some of the reasons that why we see overweight and obesity, specifically in the Down syndrome population, and also just kind of relating to the same issues that we see in the general population, is food is just such a big part of our culture. And for a lot of our Down syndrome individuals, it's kind of how we socialize. Like if we hang out with our friends after school every day, we are going out to eat, we're going out for ice cream. It's such a big part of how we socialize that it can become a bad habit for us of kind of overindulging at times.
Yeah, and we actually had a similar conversation, I don't know, maybe a few years ago on the podcast with Joan Medlin, and she had also brought that up as food as being kind of a social engaging time, for a lot of families coming home and maybe having dinner together might be the time where they share about their day. And so for people who tend to be quite social, which are many people with Down syndrome, we do see that the food as a part of that can sometimes lead to some of the nutritional challenges that we can see. Why don't we just back up a little and just say, like, what is it just in general in anyone that might cause overweight or obesity?
Yeah, I think something that we kind of have to reframe our brains and think about a little bit is we were just saying how, we look at food as this like social aspect, but really when we think about the foods that we eat and the different kinds of foods that we eat, and maybe the amount of certain foods that we eat, we think about the energy that we're providing our bodies. So just thinking that all of this food that we're eating, the energy we're supplying to our bodies in relation to our activity level. So we want to think we're eating all these foods so that we're able to give our body the energy to do all the things that we enjoy, to go play our sports and hang out with our friends, and just thinking about how active we are. And then if we're not using all of that energy that we put into our bodies now, that our body is going to store it for later. And how we store that energy for later is usually in the form of fat. So if we are eating all of this food and our body's ready to use it for some energy, but we're not necessarily being as active as maybe we could be, we just have to keep in mind that we are storing that for later somewhere.
And I think that, one way that and tell me if my concept is wrong, I often think of it as almost like a balancing scale, that the calories in and the calories out are kind of needing to be in balance. And if either end of that is not in balance, then it can lead to that storage of fat. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yes, I think that that's a great way to think about it, that to maintain that proper balance is kind of how we will maintain a healthy weight.
So thinking about those areas, then, why is it that we see the prevalence of overweight and obesity being more common in people with Down syndrome? What is it about the calories in, calories out that you think maybe contributes?
I think that why we see this issue specifically in adults with Down syndrome, and I do say adults just because that's the population that I primarily work with, is some of our activities as we get older are definitely more sedentary activities, that we are not as active as we were when we were younger, and we don't really adjust our eating habits as we get older. So I think more of those like sedentary activities that we engage in, maybe just like sitting around watching Netflix. And a lot of the times they'll say, like, it's kind of a common saying, which is very unfortunate, that a lot of our individuals will graduate to the couch after they leave high school. And it's a very unfortunate thing that happens, but we're just not always as physically active and as engaged in our like activities that maybe we were doing growing up through school.
So then a lot of that calorie expenditure changes dramatically. I agree with you. I see this even in the pediatric side. We love the fact that children with Down syndrome are so more often included in activities, particularly in those younger ages, soccer and gymnastics and all the things, swimming, all the things that the kids do. Often they can do together, but as they get older and sports become more competitive, perhaps maybe our children with Down syndrome may not be able to compete in the same way that perhaps they could before. And so suddenly now they're not as active in those sports and in those team activities. And again, that sedentary lifestyle starts to kick in. I also see too in our pediatric population, Shannon, I see a lot of food as reward. We as a family member of someone with Down syndrome, I know that it gives me joy to see my brother happy that I took him out to lunch and he got to have a Coke, and those types of things, which add more and more calories, of course, as well. And so I suspect that a lot of the that balance we were talking about before, even starting in that early childhood, certainly into the teenage years, and as you've mentioned, into the adult years, it gets out of balance with more calories in than out. Another thing that I see, and I don't know if this is something that has been described also in adults too, but it seems that people with Down syndrome at least the kids that I see, don't necessarily sense fullness as quickly as others. So they're eating and they may be eating really, really fast, and their stomach hasn't yet had the chance to send that signal to the brain saying, hey, I'm full, and we don't need to eat anymore. And I find that for a lot of our folks, that ends up being an issue too. So I guess from your perspective, what are some ways that somebody with Down syndrome, either from healthy lifestyle choices, like what would be some ways that maybe they could be preventative, maybe in leading to the overweight, obesity, or even once that has perhaps set in, ways that they can help to bring their weight back down to a healthy level? What are some ways that you talk or counsel families?
Yes, so I think that the point that you just brought up is really important. Just thinking about a lot of our individuals with Down syndrome, maybe not quite being able to sense those hunger and fullness cues, maybe just as well as the rest of us can, or even the rest of us. It's something that we really all can struggle with a lot. So I think that this might have even been brought up in a previous podcast by Joan, but just the concept of encouraging mindful eating behaviors. And when we say mindful eating, it's really just like thinking about how present we are in our meal and thinking more about the foods that we're eating and the amount of the foods that we're eating. And ways that we can kind of encourage these mindful eating behaviors is to just like sit down when we're having a meal, sit down with our family, sit down with our friends. There's no need to try and like squeeze meals in while we're on the run. It's just like being a little bit more present. And Also to just encourage us to be a little bit more present in our meal, eliminating distractions, like turn off the TV, put the phones and tablets away, just so that we can really enjoy our meal and be just a little more present in what we're doing. I think one thing that I do like to challenge the families that I work with to do, and also my own family and myself too, this is something we can all learn from, is if we're having a meal and we're thinking, well, I'm hungry for a couple extra pieces of pizza, or I'm hungry for another serving of ice cream, or we're saying I'm hungry for, and it's maybe something that would not be the best choice for us. Sometimes it's okay to indulge in those cravings, but we just have to be mindful about not making it a habit every single day. So the challenge that I'll give to families is when the individual in your life with Down syndrome says, well, I'm hungry for an extra whatever it might be, if it's not the healthiest choice, maybe I'll say, ask them, well, would you be hungry for an extra serving of vegetables? Would you be hungry for maybe a healthier snack, maybe some fruit and some yogurt? Would you be hungry for something else that might be a little bit better of a choice? And if the answer is no, it's a really great teaching moment to be like, well, that's not really what hungry means.
That's really interesting. I like that concept as you're mentioning that, naming what it is exactly that you're hungry for. I agree, would be such a powerful thing. I wonder what your thoughts would be. Sometimes when we are counseling families as well, especially in the pediatric age range, most of our 8-year-olds aren't going to the store. They're not going to the grocery store by themselves, to buy food. And so one of the things I try to empower families is to say, if you don't buy it and it's not in the house, then no matter how much they say they're hungry for, let's say something unhealthy, potato chips or French fries or whatever it might be, that might be not the greatest thing to eat every day. If it doesn't exist in the house, then it's not there for them to eat. I think that's important for our younger ones, especially building those healthy choices when they're buying food, and starting that really at a young age. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I really love the idea of this. So a lot of these foods that maybe, especially the snack foods that might not be the healthiest choice for us, not that we're never going to have it, but it's like, maybe it's not something we buy every single week. Maybe it's something we buy every other week, or maybe every couple weeks, just as a snack or as like a little treat for us. So I think the big thing behind this is just being intentional. And it's one, maybe not having so much of the unhealthy options available, but also making sure that if we're trying to be intentional about the meals that we're planning and the foods we're putting in the house, like having more fruits and vegetables available, planning that out as a snack, like just being intentional about the meals that we plan and the snacks that we plan, and trying to include healthier foods like our fruits and our vegetables and our whole grains, and including those as part of our meals and snacks. So we're being intentional about maybe not having so many unhealthy options in the house, but we're also thinking about the foods that we're putting into our house so that it's easy for us and they're readily available.
I love that. And I think one of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast, really, if we're talking about behavioral modification, or if we're talking about learning how to read, we always talk about the strength that many people with Down syndrome have in visual learning. They seem to be folks that just their brain, many times people with Down syndrome can understand or see things differently than we do. And so one of the things that I'll often talk about, and again, I'd love to get your opinion on this, is sectional plates. Of course, in pediatrics, we have, cute like princess plates, or, monster truck plates, or whatever you can get. But in adult, you can also find adult sectional plates too. And oftentimes we talk about limiting portion sizes and visually putting the main dish in one section, but then having a section that is always going to have a fruit or a vegetable, and a section that's always going to have something, on the healthier side. And then if the person says, oh, I'm still hungry, we can visually show them, are you hungry for, and then you can show them the vegetable section, for example. And so we'll use that visually. We'll also sometimes say, if they say, oh, I always want to have 10 chicken nuggets when I go to the restaurant, that oftentimes taking 5 and cutting each of those into half and looking like 10 can make it feel like to them that they've had more, but yet calorie wise, they haven't. I don't know. I wanted to get your thoughts on those. These are just things that we sometimes talk about. Maybe I'm doing it wrong, but you could tell me.
Yes, no, these are exactly the kinds of things that I will work with families all the time. I feel like in the adult population, what we'll do is I have just like specific visuals that I like to use, like printed handouts that show like where like this food group fits on the plate and where this food group fits on the plate. And we try to make sure that half of our plate looks like our non-starchy vegetables, just so we're trying to get in all the veggies that we can, especially at our lunch and dinner meals. So I think what I will say to families is giving them this visual of what a healthy plate should look like, challenge the individual to try and pick where the foods that they might want to go, like the foods that they might want to have, where they fit in on this plate. And that's something that usually it's that visual learning that is so that our individuals are just so good at. It's really it's definitely a strength of theirs. But I also will say it's something that we think about for lunchtime a lot too, because a lot of our individuals, they do still go to work, or they do still, go out and hang out with their friends, and they'll be packing a lunch when they go to a lot of these places. And instead of just having one big bag that you throw in all the things that you want to have, I will recommend trying something like a little bento box, which is like kind of like a sectioned lunch box to where you fit in specific foods in specific amounts.
Yeah, and that's actually brings up another thing. I love that, and I think that one of the things, especially in our pediatric populations, that we see is, especially since the COVID time, a lot of schools were, doing free breakfast, free lunch at the school, which is wonderful, especially for our families. Maybe if there's some food insecurity or inabilities to be able to necessarily go out and buy all these foods that the school it was offering them. But one thing that many schools, I think, were also doing was offering a lot of maybe some unhealthier options, easier, faster to make, and makes the kids happy, and those types of things. And so we recommend to a lot of our families, especially if they can do this from a financial perspective, is that they send them with a packed lunch, similar to what you're just saying, like with a sectional box or something like that, so that there is still some control that the family has over the breakfast meal and the lunch meal. Because if 2 out of the 3 meals there are out of the parents' control, that can lead itself to excess calories as well. Not sure how that would work so much with adults, Shannon. How do you work around that, or do you end up just recommending that they always go with a lunch and not buying it from the store across the street for lunchtime?
No, I think that this is a really important concept that definitely translates from pediatric to adulthood. We talk about just like the main principles of like feeding and eating, where we will say that even like in childhood, we say the parent should decide what is to eat and the child should decide how much. So it gets a little more difficult as our children go from pediatric to adult with their role of deciding how much. So I do think that like the pre-portioned plates or the pre-portioned like the little lunch boxes, it can just help them to encourage those behaviors like for themselves. Like, not saying that their parents have to pack their lunch for them every single day. I think it's really powerful for them, and it makes it a little bit more fun to include them in that process. Like if the individual is, going to work, have them pack their own lunch for work. Maybe you help them a little bit, but it's not something that they can't do. Or including them in meal preparation, like teaching them how to like measure correct portions. It's like that's something that's so powerful, I think, even if it's something small. Like a lot of our individuals into adulthood, not probably in the pediatric setting too, like condiments is such a big thing for them, and we will tend to overdo it a lot of the time. And even just teaching them how to use like a tablespoon measure, and it's like including them in that process so they can kind of develop these skills themselves, to where that role that's theirs of deciding how much, that they really aren't making so aren't making like unhealthy choices to the extent of like overdoing it and overindulging as they prepare their meals.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I don't think we've talked about yet, Shannon, on this podcast yet is from a nutrition, from a dietitian's perspective, what would you say, and maybe there's no right answer to this or not, but what would you say is an optimal or recommended number of times that somebody would go to a restaurant to get food? We know that restaurants are, of course, trying to make money. And so a lot of the times their foods will be high in fat and calories and sugars and things like that. Is there a certain amount of time, days in a month or something that you would say would be a nutrition approved amount of times to go to a restaurant? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like my thoughts on this are, and this is something that a lot of the patients that I work with, going out to eat is such a big part of their life, just since it is such like a social aspect. I feel that, if you're going out to dinner once a week with your family, that's perfectly acceptable. And maybe you pick up lunch somewhere once a week. I feel like once a week for like getting a fast, like eating out for lunch and eating out for dinner, I feel like that's pretty acceptable. If it's turning into more than that, and even if it's not turning into more than that, and you'd like to try and make some healthier choices when you are out to eat, that just knowing that a lot of those restaurants, they do have their nutrition facts information either online or in the store, and that there are always healthier choices that you can make if it is something that either, you only go out once or twice a week and you'd like to try, or you go out more than that and you'd like to try. I kind of always say something that is really beneficial for our individuals with Down syndrome is that if you are the person that is taking that individual out to lunch or taking them out to dinner and you'd like to encourage them to make a healthier choice, look up the menu yourself ahead of time and look at the nutrition facts information and give them a few options to choose from. Give them maybe like 3 things off the menu, like which one of, so they still feel the empowerment of getting to make their own choice, but you're just, it's like the same role that we decided again, like you're deciding as the parent or as, whoever it might be taking this individual out somewhere, you're deciding what is being served while the individual still gets that power in their choice.
And in the end, that probably is helpful for us as well, because then we'll probably choose from those options too. So that's a win-win on both sides. I really appreciate all this discussion. I definitely, with our families too, especially the younger ones, we run into families who think that juice is a necessary part of the diet. And so we'll say, oh, do you give your child any extra sugar in the drinks like soda? And they'll say, oh, no soda. We don't do that often at all, but we give juice every day. And so I also want to make sure our families know things like using skim milk or replacing any juice options with water. And of course, avoiding soda, because nutritionally, there's really not much in that is helpful at all. Would you agree with that even in adults too?
Yes, this is another topic that I frequently will discuss with my patients and their families that, again, going back to the concept of us fueling our bodies, when we are drinking our calories, we have to remember we are not getting that, we're not getting the fiber, we're not getting, depending on what the beverage is, we're probably only getting added sugars. So we have to think that sugar is going to be our form of energy, but without the additional nutrients in there, we're not really having anything that's going to keep us full for very long. So we're really just getting excess calories that will kind of give us a little bit of satisfaction temporarily, but not do very much for us in the long run. So we always say, like, trying to increase your water intake so that we're not having so much of these sugar sweetened beverages. Even if you do have to like maybe flavor your water a little bit, whether it's like fresh fruit or it's some kind of flavor enhancer that might be calorie free, like that's always a good option for our individuals that maybe are just getting started trying to drink a little bit more water. But I'll always say and this speaks to the love that our individuals have for anything routine, getting them a water bottle and designating it as their water bottle usually makes them like very happy, because it's like, this is the specific water bottle that I have and only water goes in it and I will drink water out of it every single day. So that's something that's usually a little bit helpful. And then also like there are little apps out there that I like that help you to like track your water intake. Like there's one that I have, it's super cute. It's called Plant Nanny. And every time you drink a glass of water, you have to go on and water your plant. And if you don't water your plant, he's not feeling very well. So there's all kind of like little apps and stuff in there, just giving them a way to track and be accountable as they try and implement some of these, lifestyle changes into their like daily living. Because it is really like lifestyle changes. And for individuals that have been, accustomed to a certain way of life for a long time, it is definitely something that's a challenge. So just telling them, well, I think you should drink more water, or I think you should eat more fruits and vegetables, isn't really going to be super beneficial to them, because you're not giving them a way to really, like, there's no specific goal there for them to kind of like drinking. If they're just trying to drink more water, they could have like a sip of water at dinner, and technically that counts. So it's being a little bit more intentional about like trying to drink 2 more glasses of water every day, and this is how you're going to track it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think small changes can make huge impacts, right? So if somebody eats or drinks 100 less calories per day, then in a week, that's 700 calories. In a month, that's almost 3,000 calories. And so we start to see small changes making huge impacts over the long haul. And one thing I also say too, at the same time as we're trying to reduce even just a little bit the calories in, then also trying to increase the calories out. And that sedentary lifestyle, that even just a 20 or 30-minute walk a day, even if that only burns 100, 150 calories a day, is also a big change long term that can help as well. And so I anticipate, as part of your counseling, you probably talk a little bit about trying to increase activity as well.
Yes, it's always definitely a topic of conversation. And I really like how simple that you made it, because it's really not like everybody needs to go out and get a personal trainer and spend hours in the gym every day. It really is something as small as making a little lifestyle change to try and increase your activity level, even if it is just like taking a walk around the block with a friend or a family member. It's a great way to get some social activities in there that aren't centered around food also. It's like, let's go do something active together. We can go to the park, we can take a walk, we can go on a hike. It's just, there are other ways for us to get that socialization. And it really can be something as small as just taking a 30-minute walk every day.
Yeah. Well, Shannon, I think we've talked about so many different aspects on this topic. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that our listeners know when it comes to maintaining healthy lifestyle in people with Down syndrome?
I really think that we've covered most of it. So I'll just say that I do think that as we're trying to encourage our individuals with Down syndrome to implement some of these like healthier habits, that it really is like that the goal setting is such an important thing, just so that they have something to work towards and they'll like feel proud of themselves for achieving. But I also like to stress that, we're not going to be perfect every single day, and that's important to reinforce for our individuals, because really it's about how, if we are having a day where maybe we went out for lunch and then we went out again for dinner and we were drinking a bunch of pop and we didn't have our best day and we didn't meet any of our goals, that day is less important than the next day. Mm-hmm. What really matters is knowing like, I didn't do my best today, but there's still tomorrow and I can continue to work toward my goals. So I think that the goal setting and just stressing that, it's not going to be perfect every single time, but it's definitely still worth it to work on implementing some of these healthier habits.
That's such a fantastic perspective, Shannon. I appreciate it. Anyone who's ever tried to start a new healthy lifestyle plan with eating and exercising, that day that you don't do it can be so discouraging. So I love the idea that it's not as important as the next day. I think that's a really great. I'm gonna steal that from you if that's okay, Shannon. When I talk to our
absolutely.
So I really appreciate you joining us today. Listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this topic as well. This is something that is so common just in general, but certainly also common in our loved ones who have Down syndrome as well. So I hope that this topic that we've just covered today can give you some ideas of how to approach healthy lifestyle, eating, exercising, things of that nature today. I hope that was helpful for you. As you all know, we have this podcast goes out all over the world, and we really love getting topics like this that come from listeners who say, hey, we'd like to hear more information about that. Just send us an email to downsyndromecenter@chp.edu, and we'd be glad to find topics that we can cover that you would like us to cover, and we can find speakers that can help us in that topic as well. If you'd like to join us financially, we have been so happy to see so many of you joining us that way. You can go to givetochildrens.org/Down Syndrome Center, which helps support this podcast, but also all of the work that we do here through our center. But until next time, bye-bye.